Mick Mulvaney, the budget director for the White House, obviously is a Republican to his heart. And it really kills me how when they're talking about spending our money and reducing taxes, poor people and middle-class people pretty much get left out of the loop. Now, let's just talk about this health care bill. If they have their way, they're going to try to force this particular bill through this coming Thursday. And it's a 50-50 proposition whether it's going to be able to pass through the House of Representatives, and even less of a proposition once it goes to the Senate. There are 4 senators that are currently on record as being no votes. And as long as the Democrats stick together, that's 2 more votes than are needed in order to defeat this legislation. But I want you to listen to, all of the slanted facts that we're going to be given and are being given by the current administration. Now, this guy was all over the morning talk shows. He was on, obviously, Face the Nation. He was on Meet the Press. I believe he was also on ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos. But I think this one is pretty much the most telling, so I'm not going to bore you or stretch this video out longer than necessary with his particular points of view, though I may interface one of the other morning talk shows. Okay, here goes the interview on Face the Nation.
The administration's take on the budget and health care. Joining us now is White House Budget Director Mick Mulvaney. Welcome, Mr. Director. I want to start with something the President told Tucker Carlson on Fox about the health care plan. He acknowledged that the people who voted for him, who sent him to Washington, bear the brunt of a lot of these changes in the health care bill. And he said, quote, "We will take care of our people or I'm not signing it," meaning the bill. How's he going to take care of his people without fundamentally changing the bill?
The same way that we've taken care of people for a long time in this country, which is through competition.
Okay, now let me stop him right there. All these Republicans are talking about competition. They're talking about cross-selling insurance over state lines, which every state in the union has the ability to do that already, but they are choosing not to. And insurance companies aren't pushing the issue because it really is expensive to sell insurance across state lines, okay, with the same company having to adhere to the various insurance laws across the state. Now, if they are talking about wiping out or trampling over states' rights and making one law, okay, one size fits all law as far as health insurance companies are concerned, we're talking about some major legislation, and that cannot be done, and is not being done with this current legislation. They are consistently telling us that that particular fix is back in step 3. Their overall plan has 3 steps. The first one is the one that they're trying to accomplish now with the budget reconciliation bill, which is what this particular healthcare bill is. It deals with finances only, and that's the only thing it can deal with. That's why they can get it through the House, obviously with a majority vote. All legislation goes through with a majority vote. But in the Senate, they only need 50 votes for a reconciliation, whereas they would need 60 votes for brand new legislation, which is what this would be. So they can't even attempt to stick in what they're claiming is going to be legislation to allow insurance companies to sell over state lines via a national vehicle. So again, they're going to be trampling over states' rights. Number 2, as far as forcing competition, that's a crock of bull pucky hockey, whichever way you want to see it. You cannot force a private insurance company to go into a market, just as you cannot force a private insurance company to stay within a market. If that were in fact the case, United Healthcare would not have been allowed to exit 26 markets where it was selling health insurance. Why? Because they got pissed off that the government would not allow them to merge with Humana. So instead of expanding their coverage, and they were in approximately 30 states, they were talking about expanding out another 15 states. That was this summer before they got turned down on that merger. They went from expanding to contracting, and I mean hugely contracting, okay? And that's when their CEO also issued that bullshit line about Obamacare basically in a death spiral and collapsing. That particular statement has been parroted by every single Republican person who has been on mainstream media speaking about health care. And it's a lie. The actual people whose job it is to know what is going on with insurance companies, the National Board of Actuaries, have indicated that Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, is not in a death spiral, okay? And the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, has said the same thing. But they choose to parrot that because it fits their narrative. And the only reason that that particular CEO from United Healthcare said that was he was trying to build up ammunition to try to force through the merger that was denied. Okay? Now, that's a long-winded explanation on what's going on here. But as far as this phony competition is going to cure everything, that's a bunch of hot air and is not going to come to pass. And as far as that third prong, they are not going to be able, if they can get the first one through, the second one is highly, highly unlikely. The third one will not go through because the Democrats will not go along with them. And they damn sure are going to need 60 votes to pass any type of new legislation. And then we still have the 2018 election where there may be changes within the House and also the Senate, so that they may need even more Democratic votes, though the numbers are weighing against the Democrats. They have more seats in the Senate that they have to defend than the Republicans do. But anyway, here we go.
That's one thing that doesn't get very heavily reported, is that part of the problem with Obamacare right now, and I've discovered this firsthand. I live in South Carolina. We're down to one provider. You can imagine what that does to price competition on cost. It doesn't do anything but increase the cost. And one of the key points of the plan that is in the Republican House right now is it is going to encourage more competition, which will lower the cost for everybody, not just Trump voters.
But the president.
Yeah, okay, and he's right. United Healthcare exited a ton of states. And if anybody has the wherewithal, they can turn around and look at the financial statements for United Healthcare, which is a publicly traded stock on the stock exchange. And you can get a copy of their 10K report. That company last year, with all the losses that they quote unquote incurred through the Obamacare or Affordable Care Act exchanges, that company made $1.6 billion in profits. So just how bad is it for them to be involved in the exchanges? Yes, they do have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to try to make as much money as possible, but they also have a fiduciary responsibility as a business operating in this country to try to serve the citizens, to provide service to the citizens also. So in my opinion, the fact that they took it in the shorts, and that number was, I believe, about $300 to $600 million. That's the loss that they took on the exchanges. But the profit they made in the other parts of their company were 2.2, which netted out at 1.6. I think that they can could be a little more understanding and a little more generous as far as providing a service for the country. But that's just me thinking.
The president's remarks here were, having taken all of that into account, knowing that there's competition in the bill, what he was responding to were studies that showed that the tax credits go to the wealthy, and that there were the tax breaks, I should say, and the tax credit doesn't really help people who are just above Medicaid. And he was saying that part of what is being negotiated in this interview with Tucker Carlson, he said that's part of the negotiation. So I'm wondering if that's part of the negotiation, what's he asking for to make it better for those people who are hardest hit?
Keep in mind your first comment about how the wealthy get all the tax cuts. The president promised to repeal all of Obamacare, and that's who was taxed at the beginning. So I keep wondering why folks just want to focus on who gets a little bit of a tax benefit instead of focusing on the fact that we're replacing a truly broken system. But to your
Okay, and again, the system is not truly broken, but it's been described that this is reverse Robin Hood. Yes, the wealthy were taxed more than the middle class and obviously the under middle class. But who can afford the taxes more than the wealthy? It's called paying your fair share. They got to where they are based on the backs of the middle class and the poor. So it's only natural that they should be asked to pay their fair share in order to help the middle class and the poor. And when you talk about $660 billion of tax relief to the wealthy on the backs of the poor who are going to have to pay more for their premiums. Actually, they're not even going to be able to afford premiums, so they'll be off. The middle class is the one that's going to have to pay more on its premiums. Its deductibles are going to go up. These guys are just lying to us. And unfortunately, if a lot of people believe this lie, when the dust clears, there's going to be a lot of hurt people in America. All right. So, but he makes this comment about why do we worry about the people that are getting the tax breaks? Because those people can afford not to get the tax breaks. That's why. It doesn't hurt them not to get the tax breaks, but it does hurt the middle guy and the little guy, okay, for those tax breaks to be given to the rich and for their services, their insurance, their ability to obtain insurance. It just hurts them, period. So the trade-off, in my mind, is unequitable.
Point about what we're trying to do is to make sure that folks have various options available to them. They're going to get the tax credit. We're going to have the HSAs, which don't exist anymore. That will lower their net costs.
HSAs basically are health savings accounts. But if you don't have the money to put into a health savings account, that is no benefit.
Especially on an after-tax basis, and we're also going to introduce this competition. So the president knows, believe me, we know who his voters are, and we're going to take care of them. There's no question about them, but that doesn't mean we're leaving Obamacare in place, because that would actually hurt them dramatically.
I guess the president is, if I'm a working class person, you know, and I voted for President Trump, what am I getting out of this? I mean, just as a political thing, what am I getting?
You're getting something you don't have right now, which is care that you can afford, and that's important. The Affordable Care Act wasn't really, Obamacare wasn't really the Affordable Care Act. It was the Affordable Coverage Act, and those people that you just described could afford to buy insurance, but they couldn't afford to go to the doctor because the deductibles were so high.
But what of these studies that show, you know, a 64-year-old, his premiums go from $1,700 to $14,000? That's not affordable.
It does, but it doesn't take into consideration, first of all, the other things we'll be doing. Keep in mind that the reports that you mentioned don't deal with any of the regulatory reform that Tom Price at HHS is trying to put into place. Doesn't take...
Okay, so let's stop it right there. And he's right. It doesn't take into consideration anything that they want to do. It can only take into consideration the things that the bill accomplishes. And when I say want to do, that doesn't mean that those things are going to get done, because they have to be voted on separately by Congress. And they don't have the votes at this point in time, and possibly not in the future, to get parts 2 and 3 done. So if they only get this first part done and nothing else is done, people are screwed. So he's trying to sell us a pig in a poke as far as don't look at what's going on right now. Look at what's going to go on 2 or 3 years from now. Meanwhile, people are still going to have to obtain insurance and pay premiums. And that 64-year-old person would have to pay, obviously, a $14,000 premium for the next 2 years before he starts to see any benefits, if they do in fact come to pass, which would lower the cost of insurance. And it damn sure is not going to lower it by $10,000 or possibly not even $5,000.
Into account any of the other, what we call the phase 3 programs that we're trying to push through Congress, such as medical malpractice reform, sales across interstate across state lines, and it also doesn't include the couple of amendments that we've agreed to the last couple of weeks. So that the estimates, I think, are just not reflecting the true bill.
So, in terms of this first phase, though, the president's basically going to have to. I mean, the first phase isn't going to take care of those folks who voted for the president. They're going to have to hope that in the future legislation and through regulation, they'll get the kind of relief that the president is asking for.
No, I disagree. I think those folks will be immediately better off because, again, you're focusing on what it costs to buy a health insurance policy coverage, but that doesn't allow you to go to the doctor. So the real question is, when you get sick, will you be able to go get care? And I think, without exception, those folks will be better off under the new plan than they are under Obama.
You mentioned getting care.
How can they be better off if their premiums immediately jump like $10,000 or $14,000 and they don't have the money? There is no flipping way that they're immediately better off. So again, this guy is sprouting bullshit.
The president has said, as a candidate, he said about health care, there was a philosophy in some circles that if you can't pay for it, you don't get it, meaning health care. That's not going to happen with us. He's talking about universal care there. That's not, you're not going to have universal care after this.
The only way to have universal care, if you stop to think about it, is to force people to buy it under penalty of law.
So was he mistaken when he said there should be?
Keep in mind what we're replacing.
That is not the only way to get universal care. What you do is you institute a tax, which is an anthem for Republicans. You institute whatever, a 3 or a 4% tax in order to put in universal health care. Hell, just look at the healthcare systems in Japan and in Canada. They all have universal health care. They all have access to whatever they need. And you don't see their economies or people complaining about it or going into the tank. So again, this guy is sprouting a bunch of crap. Universal health care, single payer, was the way to go. And goddamn Lieberman, if his ass had gone along with the Democrats, we'd have universal health care, single payer right now.
Got now is we're forcing people to buy it under Obamacare, under penalty of law, and people are still looking for a way not to buy it. So clearly the government mandate doesn't work. The better process, the better function is exactly what we're trying to do now, which is to encourage people and enable them to buy a policy they want and can afford.
Well, with that, but universal care was not really a promise he could make.
Again, the only way to get truly universal care is to throw people in jail if they don't have it, right. And we're not going to do that.
Let me switch to the budget. You said...
Okay, and again, that is not the only way to get universal health care. Basically, you put a payroll tax in place that basically funds universal health care, and it's a done deal. So, in closing, this guy's full of crap. They're trying to sell us a pig in a poke. They're trying to sell us on a promise that's going to happen, in his own words, 2 steps down the line, which translates into years down the line. People are going to get hurt, and they're going to get hurt badly.